Hey everybody, welcome back to my garden in July. Hope everybody's staying cool out there. It's 93 degrees today, so I had to wait for the sun to go down completely before coming out here to shoot this, but I can't guarantee my phone is gonna handle it before it wants to shut down. So I wanted to come out here and do just a quick garden tour. I don't think this video is gonna be as long as the usual because, well, it's just so freaking hot. So we're starting the garden tour right here in my driveway garden, the sun garden, the pollinator garden, all-you-can-eat buffet garden for the pollinators. And I do want to spend some time talking about individual plants and giving you some close-ups and detail about the cool things that are happening. But I also want to give some longer shots, thanks to some of you who mentioned that in the comments. Give you some long shots so you can see the garden as a whole, and also talk about how I design my garden, how I place plants, and you know what I put where and why, all that stuff. So let's start. We're going to start right here with the Joe Pieweed. This is the Little Joe, dwarf Joe Pieweed, standing tall, 6 feet tall. I know, it doesn't seem like it's dwarf, but I think the native variety actually gets about 10 feet tall, maybe even taller. So compared to that, I guess it is a dwarf, but it's a perfect statement piece right here. This actually replaced the Avondale tree that I had to rehab. I had to put it up in a pot because it was suffering from root rot. This is a pretty moist area. Soil doesn't drain very well. Joe Pieweed loves that. Look how happy it is. Got lots of bees up here. I've seen a couple swallowtails, but they're really enjoying this right now. And then down here on the front, we've got some of the annual salvia, kind of tucked in around the Kismet raspberries. This is a coneflower that, in my opinion, is like a one and done bloomer. It goes off real big in the, let's see, when was that? June, early June. And yes, the color starts to fade by now, so it's not as intense and vibrant as the fresher blooms. But I prefer this over the dead-headed look, personally. So yes, the color isn't quite as vibrant, but it does, you know, it does offer some color, and those cones certainly give you a lot of a wow factor here. So on the front of that, I have some lower growing things. The yellow plant there is a golden, I think it's called golden Helleray holly. And we've got some small annual ageratum, beautiful blue flowers. The purple plant is a sunsparkler dazzleberry, just about out of bloom, you know, a little bit faded there. And then we have a variegated liriope, all just hugging around that corner there, looking really nice. And then from this angle, we can see some of the opening act white phlox starting to rebloom again. This one blooms profusely in the spring. Big show, almost looks like big hydrangea panicles. Then they turn into like kind of dried seed heads. At that point, I come in and cut them back, and probably 3 weeks later, they flush out with all this new, beautiful foliage, nice and fresh, and then they'll put up some new sporadic white blooms for us. So this one's a winner in my opinion. It does get a little floppy when it's in full bloom, so you do have to be a little careful. You know, if you have a lot of rain, you might need to stake it up, but it's totally worth having in the garden. Beautiful little repeat bloomer. I have some Stachys Humelo also tucked in here. I've already cut the stalks back on that, so now we just get to enjoy this nice, clean looking foliage. I don't know. So we've got some blue, silvery blue Artemisia on the front. That usually does spill over into the walkway at some point during the year. But just a nice, excellent little variety of plants at the front of the border. We've got some, you know, slightly taller layers stepping up as we look at the coneflowers. These are the Sensation Pink coneflowers. We have a Veranda Cream Rose. It's out of bloom right now. Our Japanese beetles are still here a little bit. They've mostly moved on. They usually are here for about 6 weeks, but boy, did they love the rose this year. I had to just trim this up just to clean up the foliage, but you can see it pushing new growth. And before long, we're gonna have some new blooms to enjoy. Okay, we've got the Royal Candles Veronica. This is a early spring blooming flower, but if you deadhead it, it will repeat bloom, and you can keep that party going as long as you continue deadheading it. Always an excellent choice in my garden. And the other Veronica here is the Giles Van Hees, which again is still blooming a little bit, not as heavy as it does in the spring, but something's better than nothing this time of year, right? Beautiful iris foliage kind of peeking up through the back, and you can see the Supreme Cantaloupe cone flowers right behind there. They cross through the pathway onto this side. More Giles Van Hees on the front. We have a Bundle of Joy sedum, giving some beautiful kind of sparkly texture. And now our little Gold Star Rudbeckia are in full bloom, looking amazing. And now you can see another Artemisia spilling out onto the driveway. You know, the rule in my house is don't run over the plants in the driveway, but once they spill over onto the driveway, I can't get mad at people if they run it over. It's kind of a risk we have to contend with. So anyway, that's there. There is a small dwarf Mugo Pine. I've had that for about 3 or 4 years now, so it has grown a little bit. Kind of hides back here, but it holds it down in the winter time for us when there's nothing else to look at. And there's a Pugster Blue butterfly bush right in here. I did have to like deadhead some of the spent blooms already, but it still continues to bloom. We love that. Big tall zinnia, kind of random spot for that. I wasn't expecting these to get that tall. I should know better by now. These zinnias are always exceeding their height expectations. And the Glamour Girl phlox are still going for it. In my experience growing the Glamour Girls, they usually like have their big bloom maybe the first or second week in June, and then they sort of go into a little bit of a lull, but then they come right back. The petals will fall out if we have a really hard rain, but again, they just come right back. So this one's a very bright variety, powdery mildew resistant, and it really shows up in the garden. Serendipity alliums starting to bloom right here around the bird bath. And in that bird bath, I've got the Dragon's Blood sedum. I thought it would sort of take on an even more red appearance now that it's in like a very hot, dry, sunny space. It's subtle, but I was just hoping it'd be a little more of a vibrant red. All right, we got some lemon coral sedum on the front. More of the blue suede shoes. Yeah, blue suede shoes salvia here. And then this beautiful red plant. Oh gosh, what an overachiever this one is. This is black truffle lobelia. Let me just get a close-up on these blooms so you can see. This is also known as the cardinal flower. So you see those individual blooms sort of resemble a bird, a red bird. But let me tell you what, the hummingbirds are in love with lobelia. You know, it's because the red flowers and the tubular shape, they're just very drawn to that. And typically when I see a hummingbird in my garden, it sort of zips in here, it goes for a zinnia for about 3 seconds, and then it goes over to a phlox for 3 seconds, and then I don't know, a butterfly bush for 3 seconds, and then it zips out of here. Like, they're in and out of the garden really quickly. But when they discover the lobelia, they're in that area for a solid 2 minutes. They just go from one individual flower to the next, to the next, to the next, maybe over to this plant, and they're just here. They love it. They're obsessed. If you want to have some hummingbirds in your garden without having hummingbird feeders, I would recommend lobelia. Alright, and then in this space, I used to have a daisy May Shasta daisy here and also a dwarf bee balm, both of which I have cut back completely, and I sort of had this like gap of soil showing, so I just grabbed some marigolds at the nursery and just kind of planted them on either side of those root balls so that we can enjoy those annuals now. It's not going to impact the perennials for next year, and they're just giving us a lot of beautiful color. They look excellent up against this red coleus. You cannot help but see the coleus as you look down this driveway. You can see it right there. You can see it right behind the sunjoy barberry. It just stands out. And that's something that's so important to add to your garden, is different foliage color. A lot of gardeners talk about this, but it's really important to add that to your garden, because even though the coleus is not flowering at the moment, it is still offering so much interest just with the color alone. It's so vibrant. Okay, up next we have Bubble Bath Allium. It's a slightly larger version of the Serendipity Allium. It's got a little bit of a twist in the leaves, a little bit larger bloom, and even though those blooms are fading out at this point, still offering great interest. That's another thing to consider when you're adding plants to your garden. Do the dried flowers look good? Do the seed heads give texture? These are all things I consider when I'm adding things to the garden. And we've got a little stand of the Sensation Pink coneflowers again. And then we have the Indian Summer Rudbeckia right above that. Isn't this a great little layer? We have our Ageratum on the front, right? One step up we have our Sensation Pink coneflowers. Right above them we have the Rudbeckia. And above that we have all that beautiful lobelia. So this is another example of just nice layering in the garden, which is always important in my opinion, to have flowers that sort of cover the foliage of the plants that they're in front of. Let me show you a different area that might make more sense. Alright, right here I'm showing you Blue Fortune Hyssop. Beautiful plant, obviously adored by a lot of pollinators. I would say that this plant is about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, and it's in full bloom right now. Pale blue flowers. They're not the most showy, not the most vibrant, but they're still, they still have a very good purpose in the garden, especially for, a pollinator garden. But as you can see, like the top that's in bloom, that's like the top 25% of the plant is giving us color, while the lower 3/4 is all foliage. If I'm being very critical about this particular space, I would want to layer something right in front of this plant that is giving us flowers right about this level. Okay, so we're kind of hiding all that green foliage. That's just something that I'm a little particular about that, and not a perfectionist, but I'm particular. So anyway, this time of year in July is a great time of year to do some critical evaluations on your garden, and I'll tell you why. Usually when your perennials are actively flowering or just about finished flowering or developing seed, they typically are not going to be growing taller or wider. They're finished growing. They're just focusing on finishing up flowering and making seed. And so right now is a good time for you to look at your garden and say, okay, this plant gets about this tall. And this is true for plants that you've had in your garden for at least 2 years. Probably 3 years is a sweet spot. But you do want an established perennial in your garden, and then you can make a really good judgment on how tall it actually gets. Alright, I have another group of Blue Fortune Hyssop down the way here. This has been in the garden for 1 full year longer than that other one I just showed you. And it's easily, let's see, I would say that's comfortably 5 feet tall. Okay, so we got 5 feet tall over here and 3.5 to 4 feet tall over here. And that's just the same plant, but the difference is one has been in the garden for 1 full year longer. So next year, I can probably expect this one to be even taller. So as I'm thinking about what to plant in front of this to hide the foliage, I'm really going to need to be, you know, aiming a little bit taller than I'm currently thinking right now. So some plants that come to mind right now, I mean, obviously right here we have white swan coneflower. In my opinion, this is a little too tall for the front of the border right here. Can you guys see that? I mean, it's not like terrible, but it is kind of covering the hydrangeas that are right behind it. I'd prefer to have something shorter right here. And so if I were to slide this back, maybe replace that red barberry, that might be the perfect little layer right there. And as much as I love the red barberry, this is a rose glow barberry, it doesn't really fit this location anymore. You know, it wants to be 3 feet tall and wide. It refuses to grow in a like formal looking mounded shrub, and it needs to move. So this is the year. I'll do it this fall, maybe in the spring. I'll probably move it over there by the Steeds holly, so it has a little more space. So yeah, there's going to be an opening right here. I'm going to move some perennials over here, hugging up against that agastache or blue fortune hyssop, and work on that layering a little bit more. This is another example of good layering. Got a low growing sedum, kind of a small to medium sized salvia. There's gaillardia right behind that, Ascot rainbow euphorbia, and then we have some annuals kind of peeking in here. Right? It just has like a nice natural slope up. Very easy on the eyes. You can just kind of track those plants as you are walking or driving down the driveway. Alright, let's head back over this way. Alright, nestled in here I have a ice ballet swamp milkweed. And it is looking a little crazy. She's looking a little wild in here. But it works, you know. I like to have a variety of milkweed in the garden so that I can attract the monarchs, and they have sort of options to choose from as far as types of milkweed and placement in the garden. There's some liatris and common milkweed also tucked in this space. Liatris is just about out of bloom. You can see a nice like tall group of the liatris back there. We'll get a better clip of that as we come around on the corner here. And then we arrive on the front here. Firelight tibbets are starting to bloom. See lots of fresh blooms on the skirt of this plant, and some buds that are still developing towards the top here. But probably in the next video we'll see this completely covered in blooms, fresh and old, so we'll get a mixture of whites and pink probably in August, which will be really nice. I did have to trim back the St. John's wort because it was getting, well, if you look at the last month's video, you'll see it was just a little bit beastly. She was really taking over that spot, so I gave it a little prune, and as you can see, it's already pushing all this new growth, nice and fresh. It looks really good. You can't even tell I trimmed it. And this is an enormous autumn joy sedum. Wasn't expecting that to get that tall, but what can you do, you know? And these pink coneflowers are the ruby giants. For some reason, this year the Japanese beetles adored the ruby giants big time. So I did have to deadhead some that looked even worse than this. They just shredded the petals. It's funny how each season it seems like the Japanese beetles gravitate towards different plants than they did the previous season. And I don't even know why. Couldn't tell you why. But it rotates. Like last year they were all about that red Japanese maple back there, and now there's hardly any damage on it this year. Pugster amethyst. Look at the color right here. Sunjoy barberry, red coleus, Pugster amethyst, firelight tidbits. I used to have some dahlias right there where the pentas are. I pulled them out. They were just getting too tall and too floppy. That happens. More serendipity alliums here with the butterfly kisses. These are their secondary blooms, so they're not as large, but they're still so cute. Look at this one, like a little button. So sweet. All right, this side. Okay, over here, of course, we have our radiant sibilia on the end. Beautiful, variegated, love it. You can size control this any time of the year, shape it whenever you want. Always reliable, highly recommend. We have the raspberry beret cone flowers. I did deadhead some of the, most dry and spent blooms that they have, and you can see lots of other new little buds coming in through here soon enough. There's a peony back here, which is giving some foliage texture. I don't know, some people like peony foliage, some people just cut it back. I just let it grow, Beautiful coleus. This was on clearance. I am so glad I got this. This is amazing. Look at how shiny and bright that is, and it's not even like a flowering plant. Love it. All right, we've got some irises in the back, a nice rounded boxwood. So now we have different textures and foliage, right? We've got a nice upright, pointy foliage. The boxwood, especially when they're shaped, can really create more formality in a chaotic space like this. And yeah, and then behind that we have more of the firelight tidbits. Repetition in the garden is important. Here's a little fun surprise. I shouldn't say it's a surprise because this happened last year too, but the common milkweed that I have growing, which some of those guys are 6 feet tall, they do have a pretty aggressive root system, and they spread by like a rhizome, so they will shoot out, feet away from the base of the plant, and you'll have these new plants. Well, right here on the front of the border, not the greatest place to have a big tall 6-foot plant, so I am going to dig those up and probably move those to the patio garden. I've had to utilize a lot of plant supports because we have been getting these insane afternoon rainstorms, and there is nothing gentle about it. It is just an absolute beatdown as it comes falling from the sky, and honestly any plant that's over 3 feet tall is susceptible to flopping in that kind of rain. So that's why I'm utilizing these little plant stakes, just trying to keep everybody nice and upright. This is a Sangrita coneflower. Even though these colors are a little bit faded, they still look amazing, and I love them so much. Here's another example of layering. Let me back up a little bit more. Alright, so we've got the ageratum on the front. Right behind that we have our Ogon spirea, nice bright yellow, tiny little leaf, fine texture, nice rounded habit. Right behind that we have our Bleeding Hearts Heliopsis with a kind of a darker bronzy foliage, nice bright hot colors. And then as a backdrop we have that little baby blue spruce. This little sliver right here, it's working. I like it. Now something that didn't go as planned is right here. I had the pineapple popsicle Nyphophia in here. I was expecting for that to get a little bit taller. I want to say that all the rain just really kind of wiped it out. It kind of flopped. It's not really loving life. And the same thing with the one behind me. Look who it is. Praying mantis. We'll see plenty of those on the tour. Plenty of those in the garden. So anyway, as a note, just a mental note, side note for me, I might replace that Knifophia with something else because the gap from the red to the Blue Fortune hyssop, that's a little hard for the eye to go from this level to that level. Right. Alright, and then over to the right, a couple more groups of the taller plants, more common milkweed, liatris. There is another little group of Blue Fortune hyssop back there. There's a peony hiding in the foliage here, which is fine. It's not the star of the show this time of year. And I did see a female monarch in the garden today, and she was laying a bunch of eggs for us. So I'm really excited because we have had just a really slow start for the season. I've only released one butterfly, and I think we have 5 caterpillars in enclosures right now. We are just so behind. I don't know what it is. I don't know why the monarchs are not finding my garden. I've never had more milkweed than I have this year, and I have so many flowers. Like I have anything your heart desires. Serendipity alliums. We already talked about this section here. White cone flowers, agastache in the back, looks really nice. And then over here we've got this Sunseeker rainbow cone flowers. These ones were stinkers last year, and they have really figured out whatever the problem was. They have just figured it out, and they are glorious. I have deadheaded a couple of the, the biggest, driest initial blooms that were out here first, but look at how lovely. Oh, they have so many petals. So perfect. There's a little bit of a lull. If you look behind the cone flowers, this geranium's out of bloom. The autumn joy sedum isn't in bloom yet. The roses are recovering from the Japanese beetles. Ugh. And the salvia blooms heavy in the spring, but not so much in the summer. And so a lot of greenery back here. This might need to be tweaked a little bit so that we have plants that bloom at all times of the year. Early spring, late spring, midsummer, early fall. That's what I try to do if I can. This area is looking colorful. I had recently added this King's Gold Chamaecyparis in here. It's a little teeny tiny guy right now, so eventually it will fill out this entire space. But in the meantime, I just decked it out with a bunch of annuals, and they're all filling in and looking amazing. Look at all the flowers, all the different colors, textures. I love high contrast design. I like when things really pop and complement each other. That's always my goal. Another butterfly bush, pugster pinker. I cut back all the stalks on the faded blooms, Stachys humilo, and that just exposed the Dark Knight Caryopteris behind it, sort of hidden in all the other videos, but now you can see her. This one blooms a little bit later in the season. Probably in the next video we'll see those beautiful blooms starting to open up. There's a dahlia that somehow came back from the dead. More bleeding hearts, Heliopsis. Serendipity alliums. I did the Chelsea chop on this Calamintha, so it's not in flower right now because I, had to hack it back. It was really way out in the driveway, in the danger zone. Russian sage is blooming. I transplanted these over here this year, so they usually take a full year to really reestablish themselves, and they'll probably be twice the size next year. I'm loving this celosia with the Ascot Rainbow Euphorbia. Oh my gosh, gorgeous. And then we've got some more perennials here. More little gold star rudbeckia. the, I think this is Leading Lady Pink Dwarf Bee Balm. This is the first year that all of my Dwarf Bee Balm has not gotten powdery mildew. And I can't tell you why, because we have had so much rain. But I'm not complaining at all. Not at all. Another Sunjoy Barberry. There's some just bigger, taller things in here. Miss Violet Butterfly Bush. Another Ogon Spirea to its left. There's a variegated miscanthus grass on the right. I just threw in a bunch of zinnia seeds. They're all starting to flower now, different pinks and purples. And then behind them is the Miss Pearl Butterfly bushes, which I think that's probably about as tall as they're going to get this year. I bet next year they'll probably be twice the size, because I just transplanted them there this spring. And then just real brief over here. This is like, I'm not the most proud of this space. It's really a work in progress, but not a lot of plants survive over here. It's just not the greatest of soil. So there's some Nyphophia that's sort of petering out. Indian Summer Rudbeckia. There's some Salvia, Gaillardia, a random yarrow plant in here. There's one more of these orange butterfly weeds. You can see this one started going to seed already. I don't know what's up with all these bugs. I think they're, you know, just one of many bugs that eats milkweed. So I'm just leaving them alone, but I'm not going to be, you know, touching that plant anytime soon. Butterfly candy. I want to point this out. Look at all of these little seedlings here. I thought this variety was sterile. These are all little babies. Alright, moving along here. Tall Verbena bonariensis. My gladiolus. This is the last one that's here. You know, I have these staked up, but it just doesn't matter. They all break in the rainstorms that we have. They're just brutal. I think I'm going to move these to the patio garden next year. Put them kind of close up against the deck so that I can offer them at least some support that way. Nice big tall zinnias. Little haughty hydrangea. These stems up here are nice and sturdy while the other ones have sort of flopped. Oh no! It happens. More serendipity alliums, and I want to show you Bruce. This is the only praying mantis that I have named, but that's Bruce in there. Back in April, I noticed, not even kidding, at least 100 little baby praying mantises. We obviously had like an egg sac in the garden, and out came all these praying mantises. And as time has gone on, we've been seeing less and less and less of them. You know, some of them just move on to other gardens. I have a feeling there's also some cannibalism going on, but at this point we have about 10 left in the garden. And it's interesting that each of them sort of has their own little domain. And so, without fail, Bruce is always right there in that allium. He's always face down. I don't know, must be good eating down there. And I have this other one that I'll show you. I'll try to remember to show you this one. He's actually the native Carolina praying mantis. He's brown. He's pretty cool. Okay, and along this section here, let me see if I can get over a little bit closer. Front of that border. It's important to put things at the front of the border that don't flop out into the border. There obviously there's some situations where that looks good and it's acceptable depending on, it just depends on the space. But for here, anything that flops out into the lawn is going to be a problem, because when I come around with the lawnmower, I'm not going to take the time to get you out of the way. It's just every man for himself out here. So the things that are standing nice and tall, the phlox, right, prismatic pink, and this darker colored one, this is ultraviolet. These look so nice together. The obedience plant, I do have that staked up. I've used these little half hoop stakes. for them, because last year they did sort of flop out a little bit. They were more leaning than anything. They weren't like laying on the grass, but they were reaching that way. So they look pretty good. And this nice tall group of liatris. You can see the bees really enjoying that. Sorry, I just can't help but get like so close. I think they're so fun to look at. And then my Jordan Japanese maple pretty much disappears in the garden this time of year because everything else is so tall. It just kind of fades away. I have sun patience on the front of the border. They offer a nice dark foliage, very bright variegated bloom. They're an annual, so they obviously bloom all season long. Really impactful in the garden. Big group of zinnias here. There's a small, these are new additions, small Jubilee, Golden Jubilee hyssop. These will get larger next year. And the mighty chestnut, you know. I sprayed this thing with liquid fence, and I also put these stakes in the ground and wrapped them with bird netting to put a physical barrier around the buds and blooms, and the deer still figured out a way to get to them. Boy, so this is the last of them. That's it. I think we have 3 or 4 if the deer don't get to them first. Another variegated obedience plant. And this arborvitae, this is the Rheingold arborvitae. Let me get in there in just a second. Let me just stand back so you can see some more of the layering here. Serendipity, alliums on the right side, Ascot rainbow, then another sun patient. There is a newer red coneflower next to that. I just tucked that in randomly recently. And then they're all sort of hugging around the Rheingold arborvitae. And this is the plant that the native praying mantis likes to stay in. He's always hiding in here somewhere. Let me see. Oh, there he is. Okay, let's see. There he is. That's the native Carolina praying mantis. He's so cool. The zinnias that are too tall for this border, right along the path here. Honestly, that calamentha is a little too tall, and if I'm being really picky, a couple stems on that Ascot rainbow euphorbia are leaning out a little too much. The entire reason that I put this pathway in was to encourage the delivery drivers to park their truck right there at the beginning of the driveway where it's nice and straight. Stop there, walk the package up the path and to the door. That way, you know, they don't have to try and navigate up and down our driveway, which is an S curve. And so it's really important for me to keep this pathway very clear, very inviting. I do not want those delivery drivers thinking there might be a snake that's going to jump out and get them, or they're brushing against plants that might have ticks on them or something weird. And so I do need to amend this. I need to move that plant for next year. And I might actually pull this zinnia out because it is, I have a support on it, but it is still leaning hard this way. And we just can't have that. All right, let's move on. Let's go to the backyard. Take one last gander at all this. All the color, all the texture, all the layers. Pretty happy with the garden. I remember shooting the July garden tour last year, and I was not proud. I got through it in as quickly as I could because it just wasn't popping like it is this year. I really love that section right there. Looks good. This area needs some help. This is the corner. I recently deadheaded a lot of the white coneflowers. Pink profusion salvia is kind of like out of bloom right now. Liatris is fading. The dill is blooming, but I don't have any swallowtail caterpillars that I can find. we just need some help. This area needs a little bit of a makeover. All right, let's go to the backyard. So this is the patio garden, which is just the strip in between the patio and the deck. It's different than the pond garden. We'll get to that next. But right here we have a Forever Goldie arborvitae, which eventually will be it. It will be the only plant in this space because it will, you know, get that tall and wide. But in the meantime, I do have some millennium alliums, which are starting to bloom here on the front. There's another Little Miss Sunshine, little ground cover sedum here, which looks nice, and a blue zinger grass. So obviously this is like a grassy texture. Alliums also are considered a grassy texture, but you can see the difference between like an upright grassy texture and a sort of like mounding, weeping habit. This is also more of a blue tone, that's why it's called blue zinger. Just adding different textures in here. Sedums usually offer like a little bit more of a chunky texture. Really can't go wrong with sedums. They're really great to add to the garden. More tall purple coneflowers that used to be red. These used to be my salsa red coneflowers. I'm sorry for my dogs. They're out here doing what they do, distracting us. The blue shag white pine, looking good. Some of these plants are like flopping, right? It's never good to have plants flopping on top of any plant, but especially evergreens. You really need to make sure you keep these off. So I might need to pull out some of that dahlia, maybe that zinnia. Oop. But I really like this corner. This is really nice with the Pugster blue butterfly bush. Boy, we cannot hate those little Rebecchias right now. Aren't they adorable? There's some backdraft Nyphophia. Most of it's faded out of bloom at this point. There is Autumn Joy sedum, which is getting really smothered by some of these taller perennials. Oops. This is an ironweed. I don't know what variety, but that will bloom later in the season. Rhea, no. She's always trying to eat the bumblebees. And I hope someday she gets stung so that she'll stop doing that. Learn her lesson. Ground cover on the front, Mazus reptans. Mazus? Yeah, Mazus reptans. There's another beautiful Artemisia. Some of the Zaharas, zinnias, different colors, orange, yellow, and pink. I did add in some asters. So those will bloom a little bit later. And then, you know, I just got lazy. I did, I'm honest with you. I just threw in some zinnias thinking, okay, yeah, they'll fill in this gap. And this looks atrocious. I'm really not happy with the way that this turned out this year, but time just got away from me. And just more of the same over here. Zinnias, Nyphophia, butterfly bush. There's a, wait, no, leave it. Bee balm. Oh, this looks actually really pretty with the snow candles, Veronica. Pretty nice. Okay, and pond garden. Really pleased with these annuals here. These are the sun patiens. They just look so thick and lush. Glorious here. Radiant Sibylla on the corner here. Nice bright variegated foliage. We have the burgundy. Nope, not burgundy. This is black scallop ajuga. Arborvitae fern. Canna lilies. Variegated Japanese iris. I used to have lobelia planted here and it went to seed, and now I just have an abundance of little seedlings. They're literally all over the place, all the way even up here. So I've gently been lifting them out and putting them into little containers to let them grow on a little bit, and giving them to some of my gardening friends so they can enjoy the lobelia, because it's such a wonderful plant. Burgundy glow ajuga, always a hit. And the hostas. I'll stand back here so you guys can see a little better. Lots of hostas. Pickerel blooming here. Flopping into the water. A few more hostas. The stilbe, which is out of bloom right now. Beautiful variegated Japanese forest grass. I really love the placement of that one. It's just so perfect right in that corner. Wedding gown hydrangea. I think it was a little bit better last year, so I'm going to have to work on whatever amendments I need to add to the garden to improve that for next year. More sun patience, frozen margarita hostas, summer crushed hydrangea. Not as intense of a blue as it once was. Here's a fresh bloom here. Most of these have faded at this point, as expected, but pretty happy with the pond garden. Looking pretty good. All right, and then before we move on to the side yard, I want to correct myself, because in the last video I was so excited to show you these planters, and I mistakenly called this plant a don't laugh, a flat top butterfly bush. Okay, it is not a butterfly bush. It's a heliotrope, and thank you for those who informed me. This is my first time ever growing that, and now I know, so thank you. Heliotrope, not a flat top butterfly bush. Okay, and oh, while we come around the corner here, I want to show you if the mama isn't here. We have a robin making a nest, or, well, not, she's already made the nest. She's got babies. Yeah, there they are. Can you see them in there? 3 little babes. Oh, they got their mouth open. They're like, Mom, where are you? We're hungry. Oh, aren't they sweet? Hi, guys. Little robin. 3 little babies. So that's always exciting. I love when I have little baby birds in the garden. Always a treat. All right, and now we're going to make our way down the side yard, also known as the shade yard, and more recently referred to as the Garden of Neglect, because I haven't done anything in this garden, well, very little in this garden this year, and it's on my list, okay, it's on my list. The limelights are blooming. Maybe like last week, most of the blooms were still nice and sturdy and tall, and I was hopeful. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe this is the year they finally put enough growth on, they're strong enough to hold themselves up. But that rain, they just don't stand a chance. They always end up flopping like this, and it's just unfortunate. But they're pretty. And there's also another little bird nest in here. These are the little catbirds. Hi, guys. Their nest sort of became exposed when the stems of the hydrangea sort of fell open like that. But hopefully they're still safe from predators. Okay. There's really not a whole lot to mention down here because nothing has changed. I added some astilbes last month. I cut back my wee white hydrangeas because I could not bear the sight of those flopping blooms. So yeah, they look a little thin right now, but I think it looks better than flopping plants. Some King Aurelia in the back. Twombly's Red Sentinel Maple, which hasn't really put on much height at all this year. It has gotten thicker, like wider over here. But other than that, not really putting on a ton of growth. Maybe it's still getting its roots established. My hot dogs. Burgundy Glow Ajuga. I love these sections in the side yard. They always look stunning. Jack Frost Brunnera. More shade perennials and shrubs. Sun King Aurelia, Ivory Halo Dogwood. Big leaf hydrangea on the front, right? And even though those two are not blooming plants, they're still giving us that beautiful pop of color, beautiful foliage. Pancake Arborvitae, Golden Duke Hemlock, Ogon Spirea. That one has not been pruned this year, so that's, I mean, they'll get bigger than that, but that's how big this one is this year. Excelsa Arborvitaes, putting on some new growth. It's noticeable. I've seen some, brighter colored pieces of foliage emerging. Cool Splash Dervella, Tasman Ruffles, Pittosporum. Right here, hydrangeas. There's some rhododendrons that I added this year, and then on the corner, Sister Teresa hydrangea, still looking pretty good, even though the white is kind of fading. Blue Boulevard Cypress, look at all this new growth. That's noticeable from last month, I think. That's great. There's some Korean Spice azaleas on the front here, which really are the star of the show in spring. Burgundy Glow Ajuga. Again, you can just sort of see how the layering works in this space with a ground cover, kind of a low doming shrub with a taller shrub in the back. We've got a blue accent right there. A variegated accent right here. That's a euonymus. Variegated radicans euonymus. Japanese forest grass. Aureola? I don't actually know. Another Pittosporum here. And this is a snake root. I added this in the spring. I went back to that nursery that I got it from, and all the ones that they haven't sold yet, I'm not even kidding, they're 5 feet tall and they have these crazy like racemes on them. I don't think this one loves it here because it's barely grown. So I'll have to find a new spot for that one. And I need to do something about this Liriope. It's been here since we moved in, and it's always been on my list to get rid of it, but it's so tough to dig it out, but I've got to do it. And I think what I would like to do is add one of those Eclipse hydrangeas that has that really pretty dark purple bronzy foliage, because I don't have red in here. Okay, those astilbes, those are Delft pink, Delft lace, something like that, and they have like a darker foliage. Sometimes they have like a little bit of a purpley look to them, but they're not a true red. But I think an Eclipse hydrangea right there would be perfect. So I'm keeping my eyes open for one of those. Jack Frost Brunnera. I have the Ruby Slipper oak leaf hydrangeas in the back. I think those will turn, the leaves will turn like a nice red color in the fall. Some more azaleas. big Sun King Aurelia there. I'm quickly approaching a decision point where I either have to remove the boxwood here or remove the Sun King Aurelia, because they are competing, and same thing happened last year. That Aurelia just ends up engulfing the boxwood, and I've had to like prune a bunch of branches to keep it away, but I can't keep up with that in the long term. That's just not sustainable. More Burgundy Glow Ajuga. I did take some pieces off of some existing patches that I have. I have them like just rooting up in some soil for now, and eventually I'll get them out into this open area on the front, finish out this whole section. That brings us to the front again. That was quick. I'm sorry, I just breezed through the backyard and the side yard because it's just too hot, you guys. I can't be out here for too much longer. The annuals in here, I have white flowering begonias. There's a dark blue, like small lobelia, and then wizard rose coleus. Is this planting better than last year? Yes. Is it good? No. I have not figured out what the heck to do with this space. As far as annuals go, I just want something that fills in, like the sun patience. In fact, I might just do that next year. Make it easy on myself, because I know those guys won't let me down. Ooh, and before I wrap this up, they weren't blooming in the June tour. They sort of bloomed in between June and now, but I had these lilies that were right tucked in here, and they were supposed to be the salmon party oriental lilies, and they very clearly were not. So anyway, I ended up emailing the company that I bought them from online, and I just let them know, like, hey, you know, I ordered these salmon party oriental lilies, and, you know, clearly these are not that, because I sent them a picture too. And I wasn't upset about it at all, because I still thought that they were really, really pretty. So I let them know I wasn't displeased, I wasn't looking for a refund or anything, but all I wanted was to know what kind of lily it was, because I know how important it is to keep track of plant names and all that jazz, and my list of unknown varieties in this garden continues to grow. So they were kind enough, they reached out to me and they said they thought that they were the Ovati Orient Pet lilies. So Orient Pet lily is a cross between an oriental and a trumpet lily. And anyway, they're still really pretty, and I'm very happy with them. I'm going to keep them right there because they did so well, and I think next year they're going to get even taller, and they're going to mingle so well together with the ruby giant coneflowers. I think that's going to be a really pretty combination. Anyway, I hope you guys had some fun. I hope this was an enjoyable tour to watch. I hope my explanations of how I like to design a garden was helpful to you. Maybe you'll find some useful tips and tricks and be able to design your space in a better way, or not. I still am a big believer that your garden is yours to design the way that you want, and there really is no right or wrong way to do it. You know, just make sure you're adding the plants that you love and you're able to enjoy it. Hopefully your neighbors can enjoy it too. And the pollinators, of course, we got to make sure our pollinators enjoy it. But anyway, thanks for sticking it out. I'm gonna go inside. It's just too dang hot, but I will see you guys in August.